Just talking musicals, musicals with you. Hello, I'm Lesley Anne Knight and welcome to the Just Talking Musicals meetup, where I get to have a quick catch up with some of today's outstanding theatre professionals from the West End and Broadway. On the other side of the Zoom window today is director Nikolai Foster, who since 2015 has taken on the mantle of Artistic Director of Curve Leicester, the spectacular state-of-the-art theatre which since opening in 2008 has developed a reputation for producing, programming and touring a bold and diverse programme of musicals, plays, dance and opera. His work has been seen in many of the UK's leading regional theatres, touring houses and internationally. With musicals he has directed including a major revival of West Side Story at the end of 2019, Irving Berlin's White Christmas, An Officer and a Gentleman, Grease, Calamity Jane, Spring Awakening, Annie, Legally Blonde, Merrily We Roll Along and Sunset Boulevard. When talking about his mission at Curve, it's clear his goal is for a real diversity of plays, along with a good mix of musical theatre, saying in an interview in 2018, "A director who can command a large-scale musical and bring all that together and tell a story with integrity and vision and ambition can also relate to a two-hander or Shakespeare." So, without further ado, a huge welcome to Nikolai Foster this morning on the meetup. Hello, Nikolai.
Hi, Lesley. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with you today.
It's wonderful to meet you. And we were just talking just before we switched the camera on this morning, and I was saying that I've been wanting to meet you ever since I was talking to Stephen Mear about White Christmas a few interviews ago, and because I got so excited listening to how he talked about your collaboration together on.
Yeah, it was. I've been aware of Stephen's work for years. You were just talking about Anything Goes, which I remember as a student sort of trotting off to Theatre Royal Drury Lane and just sort of being amazed, you know, not only the spectacle of Trevor Nunn's production, but thinking specifically about the choreography and, you know, those rows and rows of tap dancers that just sort of went on for days covering that amazing stage. And so when I sort of got the gig at Curve, one of the sort of people I was always thinking about how, you know, would Stephen Mear come and work with us? Would he be interested in collaborating with me? And then a few years ago, we did a brand new production of Leslie Bricuss's Scrooge.
Oh, yeah.
And that was our first sort of time working together. And it was just so joyous and effortless. And it really was, you know, you were just having so much fun in the rehearsal room, and it was so sort of lively and relaxed, and then you'd blink and then suddenly a whole number would have been choreographed and we'd have just sort of been playing and working and sort of chipping away at things, and before you realize you'd sort of, you know, staged the whole show together. It was really a magical time. And then obviously recreating that and sort of furthering that relationship on White Christmas, first at Curve and then at the Dominion, has been, you know, really fantastic. And hopefully, you know, fingers crossed, if we're allowed to sort of get things going again this year, we'll be up in Edinburgh with White Christmas. So Stephen will be weaving his choreographic magic again on the show then.
Oh, fantastic. How exciting. And getting to the questions on the meetup, this first question is, I always ask people is, how was your work diary looking at in March 2020 when the first lockdown took place? Because we're talking in virtually a year later in March 2021. But one of the things that I have been very aware of somebody who writes about musicals and who I research on the subject of musicals as well. And one of the things that has been on my radar all the way through the last year is how involved Curve has been in bringing theatre to people even when we can't go out. So my question is, what projects were you involved in when the lockdown took place at the beginning of last year?
Well, we were involved in a lot of projects, and like so many theatres and arts organisations, it was, I mean, to say it was devastating when we sort of closed our doors was, you know, it's an understatement. I mean, Curve, as you know, we started 10, 11 years ago. It was quite a rocky beginning for the theatre, really started to settle down, find its feet. Chris Stafford, chief executive, and I joined about 5, 6 years ago. I keep losing the last year. It's sort of like it didn't happen. It's like sort of, you know, subconsciously, you know, cancelling it out 6 years ago. And since then, we're really proud that we have put the theatre on the map. And it is a theatre from its home in Leicester that really is punching internationally, and we're creating tours, we're creating shows for the West End, we're working within our communities, we're commissioning new work for diverse younger audiences. And when we got to the end of 2019, we were really riding high with our production of West Side Story, which was the first new production of West Side Story in the UK with brand new choreography, and where the rights holders had given us permission to sort of, you know, start afresh and create a new production.
Yeah.
And so we were very buoyed on by that success. We'd been off to New York to meet Stephen Sondheim. We'd met with the Bernstein estate. So we were feeling really exhilarated for the year ahead. We had Sister Act just about to go into rehearsals. Cameron McIntosh had just started previewing Phantom of the Opera with us at home in Leicester. We had co-productions of a new play, Maggie May, and a Frantic Assembly show out on the road, new plays about to come and tour into Leicester at Curve. And then we just finished casting and designing Roman Holiday, which again was going to be a sort of big summer musical for us, and then prepping Wizard of Oz for the end of the year. So to say we were busy, to say we were sort of really going at full capacity, and we had our youth theatre growing and our community groups and our outreach work really sort of going full metal is an understatement. So for all of that just to stop, and then the realization over those sort of first few months, you know, sort of spring last year, realizing that we're going to be closed for quite a while now, was really devastating. But to be honest, Lesley, we didn't really have time to think about it or to mourn or to feel any of that loss. We just got straight back on the saddle and started to think about how can we stay connected with our audiences during the lockdown. So a bit like you on your fantastic musicals channel here, we created like a Curving Conversation series where we chatted to artists and practitioners at all different sort of levels, backgrounds, experiences, trying to, you know, get content out there to keep audiences engaged. We ran live Q&As on Instagram and our social media channels. A lot of our archived productions we immediately put online. So, you know, anything from Memoirs of an Asian Football Casual to The Importance of Being Earnest to What the Butler Saw, they were available for free for audiences online. And we also commissioned our local artists to create content pieces specifically for an online audience. So, it was busy, and all the time, you know, we're trying to work out how we recover all of the different sort of government grants that we had to apply for, furloughing our team, all of the difficult conversations around staffing and how we ensure the organisation can last and survive into the future. So, you know, we were busy, and it's been a roller coaster, as it has for everybody, you know, so closing shows to creating new ideas. And, you know, the ethos at Curve is always, you know, glass half full. Yeah. And we always want to be positive and try and, you know, rather than see roadblocks or hurdles, navigate our way around, you know, hustle. You know, it's you know, I've, you know, always been a director who's had to sort of work hard and you know, really fight to get the jobs and find the opportunities. And so we're not afraid at Curve to really sort of roll our sleeves up and sort of navigate the challenges, because, you know, the organization has been doing that since its inception, and Chris and I, you know, do that on a daily basis.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, one of the things that you hear over and over again in the news has been that regional theatre, they have been absolutely on their knees, haven't they? Because, as you say, there's hard decisions about staff and just keeping the business open for the future, let alone thinking about being creative. I mean, your weekly status meetings must have been just alive with not just the administration of the whole thing, but what can we do? How can we keep the theatre vibrant?
Yeah,
staggering.
And I have to say, it's a testament to the team that, you know, that we have like a business continuity team, and there's a core group of people who've been sort of working full-time since March, and their energy, their enthusiasm, their passion, their commitment, people are knackered. People are sort of literally on their knees, having not had a day off since March, and they don't grumble, they don't complain, they just keep sort of powering on. And it's because there is that clarity that we are fighting. It's not sort of grandiose language or, being over the top or theatrical. We're fighting not only for the survival of our theatre in Leicester, but for our industry. And as you know, theatre, I was talking to Cameron McIntosh about this, and he said something really that's really hit a chord, which is that theatre only exists with people making it, arguing about it, seeing it, creating it. That's what keeps it alive.
Yeah.
And it feels to me that if we're not still making something during the lockdown, if we're still not talking about it, if we're still not trying to keep it sort of in the ether and the atmosphere, it will die, because it's a living art form. It's like any living, breathing thing. If it's not being made, if it's not in the ether, if it's not, if there's not a sort of blood pumping through its veins and, the sort of heartbeat sustaining it, then it won't be around after all of this. So I think that's what's been so great about the team at Curve, but also across many regional theatres and so many producers doing amazing work to keep it alive. Even, your great platform here, talking about it, sharing it with audiences and asking people to sort of think about it is a really powerful thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've loved musicals and theatres. I just love all theatres, and I feel very passionately about theatres all around the country right now, and keeping them alive, and how on earth that's going to happen. And I've always been a foolish optimist, but you always just think, oh, come on, we've got to preserve this. Is our heritage, we've got to preserve it. But I mean, one of the things I love about the Curve situation is it's a new theatre, and it's a theatre. I first went to Curve. I mean, I live sort of down south, but I first went to Curve to see the Adrian Mole show. When was that? That was a while ago now, wasn't it?
That was, I think, 2015 was the first production. And then I think 2019, it was then revived for the West End and played a really successful West End season.
So I saw the 2015, and I remember walking into the theatre and thinking, oh, wow, like this, and it's exciting. And then my experience of the theatre online this year, us all being, desperate to go out, but to experience theatre in the way that you've set up, I've absolutely was overjoyed at watching Sunset Boulevard, because talking about projects that you've had, that you've done through lockdown, I suppose, as we sashay into the second question of, that's what you had on your timetable, your timeline for last year in terms of productions, and then you had to rethink how you were going to do anything. The two that obviously are front of my mind are Sunset Boulevard, and I've just recently watched Colour Purple. I mean, wow. I mean, tell me more about that, because the way it was produced is just stunning. Both.
Thank you. I mean, again, it was born out of not wanting to be defeated anymore and not wanting any hurdles to get in the way of us actually presenting work and sharing work with our audiences. And all through the year, Chris and I talked about we've got to present something at Christmas. A Christmas show is so important. And, when we made the difficult decision to postpone The Wizard of Oz, I mean, that was sort of, mind altering, in that, the idea of, not doing a Christmas show was just sort of, it was just so alien to us. And, we'd gone through so many different iterations and ideas of what we would do. And then we decided, when it became clear that we were sort of coming out of, things were going to sort of start opening up, and there was the Operation Sleeping Beauty, I think it was called. So we created a socially distanced season of work. And as you know, there, the studio theatre and the excuse me, larger 970 theatre back onto each other.
Yeah.
And you can fly out the wall to create this huge arena, which is, just a masterstroke of invention on the part of the architect Raphael Vinoli. And we've never really been able to use that space because it's so radically different from a traditional touring space and whatnot. So it felt that this now presented the ideal opportunity to fly out the wall, 1,300 seats, about 500-600 with social distancing, open with Memoirs of an Asian Football Casual, play Sunset Boulevard at Christmas, and then in the new year do The Colour Purple.
Yeah.
And I think I get confused with lockdowns and tiers and all the rest of it, but we were coming out of one national lockdown and we thought by the skin of our teeth we would be able to open, and on we go with our planned season. And of course, then Leicester went back into whatever tier it was that meant we couldn't play to audiences. And it was just sort of heartbreaking again. The team had done all that work, the tech team, to actually create that incredible space. And we just thought, let's just go for it. Let's film Sunset Boulevard. We can't not do something at Christmas. So we just got in the space and started to imagine, how it could work. And I think because it was also challenging, and it really felt like it was do or die, it's now or never. It just sort of released all this creativity where originally it was going to be staged in the round because the audience would be all around watching it, and then I was sort of sitting there and we were working on the lights and the automation and the tech rehearsals, and I started to think, well, Norma Desmond is in this fabulous mansion and she famously enters down the staircase. How do we do that? And then, you're looking at the dress circle and you think, well, why doesn't she just enter up there? And then suddenly when you start to see the whole space as a sort of empty Hollywood soundstage, and obviously that has a lovely poetry about it being an empty theatre during this sort of extraordinary time, it all just suddenly made sense. And Joe Gillis's little garret was the fly floor above the stage, and so it all just had a sort of poetry about it and just worked. And again, the tech team and everybody, we just all came together, and in a very short space of time we're able to create something that it's different, and it tries to connect with the audience at home. It doesn't just say this is a piece of theatre which you're excluded from and there's a load of cameras watching it. It's all the time trying to connect and make clear that the only reason we were doing it was for our audience at home, for all of those people out there in the dark that Norma Desmond, is so fired on by, and then the public are her inspiration. That's the same for us. Our audience, we miss them desperately, and they make the theatre, and so we just wanted desperately to connect with them and give them something entertaining and different, and to inspire people, really.
And it's beautiful because the way that you get as an audience member, that's what I love feeling about. One of the things you love about theatre, when you sit in the auditorium and you just have all this expectation, it's lovely, and the smell of it, and the sounds. But when you're at home, it's just being at home. But then suddenly the way that it's presented, the thought and the creativity that goes into presenting it, people have thought about the foyer moment online and all the rest of it. But when I watched Sunset, one of the things I absolutely loved was seeing the lighting rigs and the cameras, and because that completely fed into the story of Sunset Boulevard and the films and the lighting and the film studio. And it was just like, oh, I love, it's just, I just got it. And the other thing that I found amazing was talking to Rhea Jones about it, who played Norma. She said to me the fact that the rehearsal time, because everybody had done it before, was so short, but the filming time was phenomenally short. You did it. You filmed it in 2 goes, didn't you?
Yeah. So we literally did it twice, and again, because we wanted it to be honest and true to live theatre, so we didn't want to be stopping and starting. So we obviously had to stop a couple of times. Like Rhea's first entrance was in the dress circle, and then it felt that first sort of big chunk of Act 1, which is Joe and Norma and establishing that relationship. It felt, there's a point where it's absurd that Rhea and Danny are literally that far apart. So we had to stop, for 30 seconds for Rhea literally to walk down, to the stalls and then carry on the scene. But it really was recorded live. We stopped, I think, 3 times, once for Rhea to get down, once for Danny to get to a position which was in the fly gallery, which you couldn't do in real time because it was frankly dangerous, sort of running up and down stairs. And then there were two costume changes where on tour they'd been very, very fast. But of course, you've got dressers and, you know, you've got people who can be close to you. But nowadays, of course, we couldn't do that. So rather than panic and rush without dressers, we allowed the actors obviously to change themselves, and we stopped there. So it was, it was done twice. We filmed it twice, I think once on the Friday night or Friday afternoon and then Saturday afternoon. And there were mistakes, there were things that went wrong, but we left them in because we wanted it to be honest. It's like you were saying about the cameras. It didn't just work well because, you know, it's a play about Hollywood and filmmaking. But, you know, the audience know that you're filming it in an empty theatre. So you don't need to try and hide any of that because, you know, if they want a sort of glossy film experience, you know, you've got thousands of films on Netflix and Amazon Prime and blah, blah, blah. So we just wanted to be honest. We were just a group of people in an empty theatre in the middle of an international pandemic, trying our best to create something that was sort of beautiful and epic and imaginative and connect with our audiences.
And after all, live theatre, you can't go back and go, oh, sorry, I made a mistake.
Exactly. You know, and there were a couple of sort of, you know, moments where people, I think, came afterwards and said, oh, can we just do that bit again? I'd love, and it's like, no, we can't. You know, you'd never do that in a live performance, and that energy it has, you know, when something does go a bit wrong and somebody has to find a way out of it. I think that's what gives that recording that you've seen that energy and sense of being in the theatre, because there were, you know, all of those happy accidents which actually give it that edge and dynamism, which is why we love live theatre and any sort of live cultural event.
And the colour purple, which is, I mean, we're at beginning of March now, and you're going to the end of this week to the 7th with the colour purple. But and I think by the time we see this on YouTube, it's going to have been done. But what a stunning show. I mean, again, did you have the same setup for filming with that?
Yeah, it was slightly different in that we didn't want to repeat what we'd done on Sunset Boulevard. The idea was very much, we want it to be better than Sunset Boulevard. We want it to be more imaginative, more original, more experimental, and in terms of testing what we can do as an organisation. But also whilst recognising it's a very different piece, it's much more intimate, it's an intense story. And I think when you've got actors of the level of, you know, Tashawn Williams and Carly Mercedes-Dyer and Akko Mitchell and that incredible group of actors, that ensemble, you want to see them close up. You want the camera to stay on their face. You want them to engage with you. And that level of intimacy and directness, I think, is really startling and beautiful. And really, I felt when I was sort of in the space while the team were creating it, and I was, my sort of role was very much just sort of keeping an eye on the cameras and seeing how that side of things was working. I felt really humbled and honoured, actually, to be that close to the actors and to see those sort of thought processes and see that level of intimacy, because even when you're sitting close to a stage, the camera just does something. It has that's why we love film and television, and why it's such an incredible medium, because it really does see something that the human eye doesn't. It captures something. It's not saying one is better than the other, but it was just sort of extraordinary, especially to Shan and Carly. It was just mind-blowing, really. So again, very different from Sunset, but equally original and daring, and just amazing that, again, we've been able to do something that feels like it's for our audience at home.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, right from the start, I was like, oh gosh, it's the same way as you feel in the theatre if something uncomfortable is happening. You're like, oh, and like, it got me. But it was so compelling, and you wanted to see it through. And the music is so great, and the voices of, I mean, there's not a weak voice in the company. It's also beautiful, and the power. I mean, I'm a singer, but the power, the way everybody integrated the way that they were singing, it was just beautiful. You've got a very satisfied customer here, I can tell you.
Well, that's amazing to hear. And what one of the really positive things about all of these lockdowns and everything happening over Zoom is that the way you can connect with people in a way that perhaps we would never before. So, for example, earlier this week, we hosted a Q&A with the actors from The Colour Purple, but also the writers. So Stephen Bray, Brenda Russell, and Marsha Norman. So it was incredible to meet them in this sort of virtual world and hear about how they made that show. I mean, because musically, as you know, it's so... it sort of has echoes of Sondheim in the brilliance that it can navigate different sort of musical styles and time signatures in order to further the story, and that character and the plot is the thing that's driving it, sort of anchored by this astonishing musical language. And, likewise on Sunset, we were able to get Andrew and Don Black and Christopher Hampton into a Zoom room and host a conversation. And again, that really wouldn't have happened in normal times, because the Colour Purple writers are dotted across America, so the idea of getting them to Leicester would have sort of just been cost prohibitive apart from anything else. So it's a lot of good is a lot of good creativity and connection is actually coming out of this time as well.
Yeah, because we suddenly don't need to be in the same room, do we? I mean, as great as it is to be in the same room, we've gone global with our conversations, and I love that.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, I was just thinking the other night that when we are back together, and, we desperately want to be back together, but, when we're doing a Q&A after a show, actually, we could now just bung a television screen on stage. And if, it is a writer who's in another country or, can't get to Leicester that day, but actually has time in their schedule, then we can have the writer there with the actors and the stage managers on the crew on stage talking about it live, and then, fielding questions. And so there's a lot of good learning to take away from this, as well.
Yes, it's amazing. Right now, look, I know we must move on with our questions, but the more you talk, the more questions I have for you. But I must stick to my meetups. You're one of the key people to talk to about the third question, which is, how do you see theatre coming out of this pandemic as the country, as I suppose the world tries to go back into economic recovery? But how do you see theatre moving away out of the lockdown situation and into some kind of normality again?
I think it's going to be a long road to recovery now. We genuinely don't know how audiences are going to respond, how they're going to feel coming back into our spaces.
Yeah.
We're very much looking at it as starting from scratch and rebuilding the theatre from the ground up. I think audiences know that theatres are well run. They know that they may not understand the minutiae of it, but if you think, I don't know, West Side Story, there's 150 people working on that show. There's 1,000 people coming to watch it every day at Curve. Those 150 people are all in the right place at the right time at 7:30. The show begins, it finishes at 10 o'clock. 1,000 people have moved safely around your space, seen the show, got to the car park, got their bus, etc. We are probably one of the best industries in the world at managing people, organising, having some of the best people. If you think about the tons of scenery which are sitting above any stage at any given moment in the country, it's astonishing how safe it is. And so I think we've had a year now to think about temperature checks as you come in, the flow of people around the theatre, time ticket entry in the same way we do our half-hour call, our beginner's call, our 10-minute call, before the show. A theatre like Curve, again, this genius, Raphael Vinoli, I mean, he must have been a sort of soothsayer, because, all of the seats in the theatre have air vents under them. The airflow around our theatre is there. I mean, we can increase it, but it's, pre-COVID, it was pretty good. So I think audiences trust us, and they know that if we say our venues are COVID secure and that we have done everything we can, then it is a safe environment. And I think, that's what I was saying about, the stage managers and the crews, and the fact that you can get 150 people in the right place at the right time every day up and down the country. That demonstrates what a well-organised, well-oiled, meticulously rigorously sort of thought out thing theatre is. We do that on a daily basis anyway, adding the temperature checks, adding the time ticketing, adding the social distancing if we need it in the early days of getting back out of this. We can do, and we're ready. We're ready to go. And any other advice or guidance from the government that we have to do, we will do. And I think audiences will trust that it's safe. And that was some of what was a bit frustrating last year when you saw people sort of jetting off on holiday. And I was delighted to see people jetting off on holiday, but it seemed a bit bonkers to me that you could sort of sit cheek by jowl, sort of packed in on a plane, but you couldn't come and sit in curve, with literally rows and rows of empty seats around you and, watch a show. But we will be able to do that soon, and we're ready. And I think we will be able to, without question, give confidence and assurance to audiences that our venues are safe. And then I think when they have that assurance and they've put that, it's like us when we went back in for Sunset, we were all a bit nervous. Second, third day, we had our masks on, we were keeping our distance, we felt safe. It was just like, the old times, it was just with a few different protocols in place. So I think audiences will feel that. And to be honest, I think people are desperate to get out. People are desperate to go and see an art exhibition or a pop concert or play football with their mates in the park or come to their local theatre. So I think people, once they have permission, they can see that it's safe and they have confidence in us, it'll come back with a vengeance. And theatre survived for, wars and generations and all sorts. It's not going anywhere. We're gonna, and none of us have fought this year just to sort of see it sort of fade at the last hurdle. So when we can fling open those doors again, we'll be ready, and we'll be welcoming audiences back. And I think there'll just be such a sort of great buzz and genuine excitement. It's going to be incredible, I think.
Absolutely, I can't wait. And of course, one big thing that is going to make such a big difference to everybody being allowed to be cheek by jowl, so to speak, is the vaccination.
Exactly. And we're hearing every day these brilliant news stories, and actually in a sort of desperate act of desperation to get my theatre back open, I've actually trained as a St John's vaccinator, so finished my training a week ago, and I'm just signed up now on the app and getting my shifts in and raring to go and start jabbing people, not only because I wanted to sort of do my bit, but also let's get everybody vaccinated. And it clearly is working. And what science has done over the last year is sort of mind-blowing, really. The sort of invention and the speed of which this thing has come to the fore is extraordinary.
It's a massively laudable thing to have done, and I salute you totally for that.
Thank you.
Job as an artistic director, when do you have time in the day?
Well, to be honest, as you know, when we work in theatre in normal times, at Curve I go in at 8:30 in the morning and I leave at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So in lockdown, the days have been intense. It's been start your Zooms at 9, but they sort of then finish at 6. So, that theatre instinct that we all have is like, so what happens in the evening? There's only so much, exactly. There's only so much Netflix or books you can read. So I just felt, I knew I'd have time, evenings, weekends, to go to the vaccination centre and do my bit. So I thought I'm not going to be any more tired than I would be on a normal sort of Curve day. So that's why I just went for it, to be honest.
Oh, Nicola, what a brilliant thing. What an absolutely brilliant thing to do. And of course, you know that you're positively doing something to getting everybody back into the swim of it all.
Yeah, and I think like when this third lockdown hit, we did feel a sense of desperation because as an organisation, we are a theatre, we are an arts organisation. We save lives through culture, through connecting people, through giving voice to their experience, their what it means to be human. We connect communities. We where there is prejudice, where there is inequality, art and culture can go a massive way to addressing those things. But we know that during this pandemic, we're not the NHS. We are not literally saving lives. So, as I say, we did a lot of stuff last year where we really wanted to stay connected and try and entertain people and enrich their lives, and hopefully offer a little bit of escape. When this third lockdown hit, we really thought, God, I mean, we can't, what can we genuinely do to help? And it seemed that where we could help was that suddenly there were a load of kids at home again, and their educations are really being turned upside down, and the consequences in future years are really challenging. So we created this thing, Curve Classroom. So for the last 8 weeks, every day at 4:00, we've had a tutorial where an actor, a director, a puppet maker, a choreographer, a singing teacher has delivered an hour's worth of tutorial in a way to try and alleviate the stresses on parents, try and give young people a sort of creative bit of education. We know we're not teachers, we know we're not the national curriculum, but we felt that's where we could genuinely make a difference during this third lockdown and do something genuinely meaningful within our sort of resources. But then, yeah, just personally, I felt I wanted to do something else. I wanted to sort of help as much as I could, and that was where I volunteered to be a vaccinator, where that sort of was born out of just a personal desire to absolutely do my bit during this crisis, really.
I've got so much respect for that. And also, I noticed that you had Curve Classroom, and I've also read about your experience of school and the fact that you said when you were, if I've got this right, that when you were at school, whilst there were people always talked about, and at college, that were opportunities in terms of being an actor and a singer and a dancer, there weren't the people's eyes weren't opened to the other opportunities that there are in theatre, like being a director or a dresser, lighting, and that's something that Curve Classroom probably is going to be putting out there, I should imagine, isn't it?
Yeah, and we had within, I think, before we started the series, we spoke to our local network of teachers and parents just to ask, is it helpful? Because we don't arrogantly create something that actually is no use to you. And they said it absolutely is useful. And then when we sort of got going with it, I think within the first week we had various teachers from around the country actually saying, could you give us a bit on technical side of things, because it doesn't seem like you're covering that, and we'd love to hear a bit more about that. And so we've made a whole sort of half-hour sort of load of sort of clips of our tech teams talking about flying and lighting and sound equipment, and so that you immediately see all of these different roles. And so we've really tried to respond to the feedback that we've received throughout the series. And like all of the online stuff we did last year, your viewers will obviously be watching this when the Curve Classroom is finished, because people are back at school next week, but it's all still online. So if you go to the Curve website and look at our Show Must Go Online page or the Curve Classroom page, there is literally hours and hours and hours of content which has been created during this lockdown. Some of it's just fun and entertaining. It's Craig Revel-Horwood and I having a bit of a gossip, or chatting to Arlene Phillips or Akram Khan. Some of it is really intense sort of the nuts and bolts of theatre, and it's really interesting, not just for young people of all ages who are interested in sort of getting a different perspective on theatre and some of the amazing roles that other people do.
It's really inspiring, and I think even though the schools will be out of lockdown, there's nothing nicer than indulging your love of you. If you love the arts and drama, it's something to sort of broaden your outlook, isn't it? If you're at school or wherever you are and going, oh yeah, this looks interesting, because you learn every time you look at a video like that, don't you?
Exactly. And I do too. I mean, it's like, that's what again has been so brilliant about some of the positives coming out of all these lockdowns, is that working more closely with the marketing team and actually getting under the nuts and bolts of how some of their tasks and the work they're doing has been really interesting, and constantly learning about theatre technology. I mean, just before we locked down, when we're opening Cameron's Phantom of the Opera, our one of our associate artists, Ben Cracknell, who's an amazing lighting designer, was working with the team on Phantom. They've got these new sort of intelligent follow spots where the actor wears a sort of tracking device on them and the light is following them. So you've still got your traditional people operated follow spots out front, but it means you can get some really beautiful angles from on stage where you can have lights where you couldn't have people in the fly tower that can absolutely move with an actor in the moment. And, you know, so there's always new technology, always new things to learn about.
How clever.
Yeah, very clever people who are, again, it's like the vaccine. That's what our country's amazing for. It's science and culture, it's invention. I mean, you know, that's why we're all fighting so hard to cling on to these things, because, you know, that science that invents that intelligent light is, you know, the two things are so intertwined. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Nikolai, we've got to get on to our next question. And it's a lighter thing. And I can't wait to hear your answer for this one. What's your favourite musical of all time?
Oh gosh, I knew you were going to ask me that question. And it really is. It's sort of impossible to answer. Well, I suppose West Side Story has to figure there, I think. I mean, the sort of epic, sort of sonic operatic score mixed with those lyrics from a young sort of Stephen Sondheim, sort of that being the sort of, you know, it's a bit like Osborne's Look Back in Anger, isn't it? When West Side Story hit, you know, the entire face of world theatre changed, and it really did mark the birth of the musical as the American art form. So I think I'd say West Side Story, but, you know, it's closely followed by Merrily We Roll Along and, you know, My Fair Lady. So it's an impossible question you've set me, but I hope that's a suitable answer.
It's a brilliant answer. I tell you why. Because West Side Story, I'm very, very interested in West Side Story. I wrote a programme about it a few years ago, and I wanted to take it further. And one of the things I really wanted to do was get the licensing for using clips of the music and the film, and I knew that the estate so fiercely protected all the rights, and I went to the top and was constantly told, no, there's a specific route you've got to go down. You've got to ask so and so, but they won't talk to you unless you've spoken to so and so. And there was a real chicken and egg situation on the go, and you had to just put the word in quietly somewhere so that another person would think it's okay. And I realised in very short order that I was probably never going to get very far with it. But one of the things I know is that everything about West Side Story is so protected, and I was amazed that you were able to do what you did and to even change the choreography, which people have raved about as well. Ellen Kane is your choreographer on that, and I never got to see it, but I would love the opportunity to see it because it's a real 5-star show, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a sort of testament to all the work that's been happening at Curve over the last sort of 5-6 years, that the rights holders, you know, the estate, as you say, is massively protected, but they knew that in Curve we would look after the piece, we would nurture it, we would love it, we would absolutely treat it with the respect that it so rightly deserves, but while taking it sort of into the 21st century. And as you say, the choreography plays a major role in that. And from the moment I first met Ellen Kane, I remember our first meeting vividly like it was yesterday. I'd never seen any of her work. I just heard a little bit about her. I went along to meet her. I was blown away by her fierce intelligence, her inherent understanding and sort of knowledge of theatre, her flair. And I thought, we absolutely have to do this. And it was the start of a brilliant friendship and collaboration. And, you know, hopefully we'll work together for years to come, because she is on a level with Jerome Robbins. She is a complete theatre maker, an astonishing visionary. And, you know, partnering up with somebody like that is a very unique and rare and special thing. And we just loved working together. And, you know, the work sort of, I guess, speaks for itself. It was an incredible cast. And, you know, it was, again, like we were talking about with Sunset, we just wanted to be brave and as sort of, we wanted to, you know, we'd never match the level of the original creators, but we wanted to at least, you know, demonstrate that we recognized what they did, and we were having a stab at being as, you know, interesting and dynamic with the form as the gauntlet and the challenge that they've set down for all of us in future generations, really.
I mean, I don't know, you may already have plans, but are there plans to bring that production back again, or is it going somewhere else? Or
Well, who knows? I
yeah,
mean, especially now everything has shut down. There's obviously a very successful production running on Broadway, and there may be talk of that coming over to the UK. Who
yeah.
genuinely knows? I mean, but certainly, if there was an opportunity for us to revive our Curve production, we'd be there with bells on and raring to go without question.
Well, and I'd be there too. I would love to see it. Okay, next question. Who's your favourite uh, musicals artist of all time, today and yesterday?
Again, it's sort of impossible, especially when you think of the wealth of sort of British talent that's around at the moment, and some of the young folk coming through drama schools and coming into shows. It's just sort of extraordinary, quite frankly. But of yesterday, I was thinking, if I could get in the sort of the TARDIS and go back in time, I would have loved to have sort of been schlepping around Broadway in the 70s and being able to sort of rock up to the Palace and see Liza with a Z and see Liza Minnelli in, a show on Broadway. And you sort of look at that Palace, the TV recording of that show, and it's just the energy and the sort of life force that you can just feel sort of pulsating, obviously, from every sort of pore of Liza's body to the lights. And it's just sort of it's sort of the stuff of legend, really. So I think that deserves a sort of respect and a bit of a shout out. And then before the lockdown, I saw Jeremy Pope in Choir Boy on Broadway, and then not long after that saw him again in Ain't Too Proud, the Temptations musical. And then I think audiences here will be familiar with him in Hollywood, the Netflix series. And he's just, again, sort of, just an extraordinary young actor of real sort of depth and dynamism and charisma, and just makes such interesting and brave choices, and can dance and sing, and it's the whole package. So I think he was certainly somebody I've sort of been inspired by in the sort of recent theatre trips. And I say recent, I mean, we're talking about a year ago. So
As you say, the last year is a blur, isn't it?
yeah, exactly.
It's like what's today? Blur's Day. Um,
Yeah.
but it's exciting, isn't it, when you see? And I think so many people say to me, "Oh, I can't pick someone from today," because you see young talent and you think, where did you get that from? How did you get that? And when you're in the presence of it, you get a tingle, don't you? And you think,
Yeah.
wow. And it is utterly special, isn't it? It's
Yeah. I mean, it's unfair to pick anybody out from
yeah,
our West Side Story because it was such a phenomenal cast. But when you look at Isaac Grin, who I'd worked with years ago when he was a kid at NYMT, and I knew then that he was, he had that sort of rare star quality, I guess. And to see him perform what I think is probably the greatest song ever written for a musical in terms of lyrically and politic and what it does musically, G Officer Krupke. I mean, I just couldn't get my head around what he was doing and how he was sort of able to conjure such an imaginative response to such a astonishing piece of writing. I mean, he really did meet the song head on. What we were talking about, as creatives, we were desperately just trying to sort of, we knew we'd never get to the level of those original creators, but, could we even have a little look up at them? Whereas Isaac on Geoff Krupke, I mean, he was just staring Bernstein and Jerome Robbins and Stephen Sondheim, straight down the eye, and he was like, yeah, I've got this, and I'm meeting you on your level. And it was just electrifying. I mean, it got standing ovations some nights. It was absolutely mind-blowing.
it's amazing, George Krupke, for another reason, because originally it was one of the songs that they were thinking of chucking out. I don't know, you probably know that. And
Yeah.
because it was such a hard-edged story, and it was such a serious story, that they didn't think that. I've read a lot about it, but a long time ago. The general feeling in the team that were putting it together, so just felt that it was a moment of comedy in such a serious musical, was just out of place. And I can't remember whether it was Hal Prince, or whether it was Sondheim, or whether it was Bernstein, or whether it was Arthur Lawrence who it was that said it, but it was probably Arthur Lawrence. No, you need a moment of levity there, because people
Yeah.
have got to be taken out of that seriousness, and then just take them out of the story that is building so fiercely, and make people laugh for a moment. And it is absolutely the perfect moment, isn't it? People love Officer Krupke.
Yeah, and also, I mean, like all great comedy, it has a very serious sort of spine running through it. I mean, for me, that song encapsulates the whole piece. It's about a generation who feel crushed and are invisible to the establishment, to the police, or to the local government, whoever it is, who are sort of crushing these young people, both literally and their sort of future dreams. So for me, it's one of the most important songs in that show, but also one of the most important songs in musical theatre, because it demonstrates the gravity and seriousness which musicals should be viewed, because they are, people often dismiss them as sort of fluff or frivolity, because people are singing and dancing, and that's not what happens in real life. Well, hello, I mean, people don't act on stage in real life. I mean, it's all theatre, isn't it? And Krupke, I think, anybody who says musicals are trite or whatever, you just go, well, just have a listen to Officer Krupke. I mean, there the argument rests, quite frankly.
I was just going to ask you about that, because I studied classical music, because there were no musical theatre courses when I was studying, and all I ever wanted was to work in musicals. All I ever wanted. I just loved them from the moment I could love anything. I loved musicals. And when I was at music college and I was studying classical singing, I could do my classical singing. I can do it to this day. But the general opinion was, oh, Lesley just likes musicals. Off you go. And when I left, they said, oh, well, off you go. And I went straight into trying to get into the West End and doing my thing. And I have always loved them. And I've read an interview with you saying, why is it that people still think that musicals aren't serious? Because they are an art form, and I love the art form, and I love the evolution of the musical and the way that it came about. Its history of the last 100 years, I think, is utterly fascinating. And yes, it is being taken more seriously now, but it's taken a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. But the people always are the voice to listen to, I guess. The sort of gatekeepers of culture who tell us what we should and shouldn't listen to, and what's fashionable, and what's seen as being the sort of intelligentsia sort of preferred culture. I mean, that's all just nonsense, quite frankly. And the people have always loved musicals. The people have always gone to see, and by the people I mean the public, and the public have great taste, and the public can cope with some of the challenging subject matter with which musicals ask us to consider. And they do understand that you can have singing and dancing one moment, and then in the next being forced to really engage with some of the great issues of our day. So as always, trust the public. They absolutely have great taste, and they do appreciate, like we do, the musical art form. And frankly, let's ignore those sort of gatekeepers of culture who tell us what we should and shouldn't sort of like, because I mean, it's just nonsense, quite frankly.
Yeah, flying the flag. Okay, Broadway or West End?
Well, it's an impossible sort of choice, isn't it? I mean, Broadway is always magical, isn't it, when we have the opportunity to visit, because I think same for New Yorkers coming to London, they sort of feel that West End is magical. So there's the magic and the mystery of Broadway, and those beautiful little sort of theatres surrounded by these skyscrapers. There's always something very exciting about that. But then we've got the London Palladium, we've got Theatre Royal Drury Lane, we've got these historic playhouses where some of the great performances by the greatest actors and leading playwrights have created work. So I'd have to say the West End. I mean, we are so blessed in this country to have such an incredible theatrical heritage and legacy, and that really is epitomized, and I think sort of supported by those venues. They're bricks and mortar. So yeah, definitely the West End.
And I suppose I've started asking people this lately because I'm fascinated. Have you got a favourite West End theatre?
I'm always fascinated by the Theatre Royal Drury Lane. I think there's something about the size of it. There's
Yeah,
something about, going to see Miss Saigon, sitting at the back of the upper circle when I was a kid, and
yeah,
sort of just been sort of not really understanding how those scenes and, a helicopter landing on stage, etc., could actually happen. And then obviously as I've sort of moved into the theatre, getting to go backstage and understanding a bit more about the history of that place, and all the machinery that they sort of was revolutionary back in the day with revolves and lifts and water tanks. So I would say maybe the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, but then theatres where I've had the honour of working, like the Piccadilly or the Theatre Royal Haymarket. They always have a very special place in my heart, because I just feel amazed to have worked there. And like the Dominion with White Christmas, I mean, I saw Grease there. That was the first show I ever saw in the West End. So to actually have some of your work playing there is it's mind-blowing to me.
yeah, because you must just feel, right, okay, I've arrived. That's,
I just feel like it's a dream, and I mean, I never feel like I've arrived. I'm always scared, and you feel like you're going to sort of get found out. So it was just a dream. It was just wonderful and magical. And again, the history in those walls, the artists that have played there, it's just astonishing. Judy Garland, Freddie Mercury, all of those great musicals. It's mind blowing.
That's what it is. They hold the theatre, they hold the history of theatre, don't they? And
Yeah,
you feel like the people that have walked up the steps and of the people who've walked backstage, and they're just there in the fabric of the theatre, aren't they? And
yeah,
the people that I know who are musicians in the theatre, who always say, and people and the actors, I love it when people say, always get there early, because they just like to sit there, and obviously you're getting ready, but it's soaking in the atmosphere of the history around you, and just making the most of your time there, isn't it?
yeah. And I think that's what's so amazing about those West End theatres, that literally every single performance that has ever happened, every usher who stood there and torn a ticket, every member of the audience, from kings and queens to the cleaners who have been in that space, their energy is in the walls. I really
Yeah.
believe and feel that, and I think that's why when you're talking about soaking up the energy, that's what it is. It's generations, it's people, it's stories, it's first dates, it's arguments happening in a box somewhere, and falling out backstage, and great performances. It's all there, and it's just in the the cement of those buildings. It's very special, very unique.
And they create the best memories for people as well, don't they? And that's why I can't wait to get back to them.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, we're on our last question. Not that I want to be, I could think I could talk to you all day. If you were to write a book about your life up to now, what would the title be, and what would your favourite chapter be, Nikolai Foster?
So I think the title would be Plodding On Positively, because that's how I felt I've sort of been going through this lockdown. And it's a phrase I've used a lot, the idea of we're marching forward. It's a bit of a challenge, as getting into the theatre in the first place was for me. And it's been a challenging journey up until this moment, and continues to be, and frankly I wouldn't have it anyway. So it's always with a sort of open heart and optimism and a positivity. So I think it would be Plodding On Positively, and I think hopefully there'd be many sort of favorite chapters. But I was thinking the other day what I'm missing most about not being able to rehearse shows and create shows and run workshops with our youth theatre and all the rest of it. And I love, sort of being in a casting room with our casting director, Kay Magson, and musical supervisor, Sarah Travis. And we're sort of sitting there on a long audition day, and, suddenly Dexley walks into the room, or, Adriana, who played Maria for us in West Side Story. Dex was our Danny in Greece. And they're the auditions you live for, when somebody just blows the roof off the room. And, it's a long day. And then suddenly in walks this mesmerizing star of the future, and you're just in this, you're in such a unique and privileged position that you are one of the first people to really see them do that and know that when that translates to 1,000 people every night on stage, it's just going to be, you know, electric. And so I think that will be a chapter I would read with fondness. That sort of the privilege of being in auditions and meeting great actors for the first time is a very humbling and beautiful thing.
Oh, wonderful. What a lovely chapter. And also, anyone watching this now will think, oh, right, I'm not going to be so terrified about auditioning for Nikolai now.
Absolutely. You should never be terrified of auditioning for anybody. We want, you know, actors to be brilliant and be their best and feel empowered. And it's our job as directors and choreographers and musical directors to give the power to the actor, give it to the artists and make them feel welcome and empowered to do their best work. And frankly, if we're not doing that, there really is something wrong, and we need to look to ourselves and sort it out quickly, because acting is a tough profession, and schlepping around auditions takes a lot of, you know, not only hard work, but actors are very vulnerable and they need to feel supported and empowered in that situation.
Well, that's a wonderful response. I mean, I was only talking from my own personal experience, I suppose, as a singer from the old days, and I was always terrified. And it's probably completely the wrong attitude to have had. I think it's because you want it so much, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
But that just keeps the passion going, doesn't it? After all. Oh, Nick, I could absolutely talk to you all day, but I know that you've got lots of other things to be getting on with today. And I thank you so much for all your time today and talking to me and all your wonderful answers about theatre.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been such a thrill talking to you and really inspiring questions. And it's been just a pleasure to answer them and have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you. It's fabulous to meet you, and wishing you and everyone at the Curve all the very best coming in this, as we come through 2021, and wishing you all the most fabulous years ahead of great theatre. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Nikolai Foster, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye everyone. Thank you.
Just talking musicals with you.